the invitation nobody expected. The silver ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star made of metal and arrogance. Its hull bore the crimson emblems of the galactic hegemony, symbols that had struck fear into 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. But as it settled onto the landing platform outside Geneva, something unexpected happened. Instead of military vehicles surrounding it with weapons drawn, a small group of humans walked out to meet it carrying flowers and welcome signs. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the United Earth Command Center, watching the scene unfold through reinforced glass. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform bore the insignia of the Earth Defense Initiative. But unlike the grim expression one might expect from a military commander facing an alien threat, Sarah was smiling. "Ma'am," her aide approached nervously. "The Hegemony ambassador has exited their vessel. They're requesting immediate audience with Earth's leadership." Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the scene below. "Tell them we'll be delighted to meet with them, and make sure the welcome committee has fresh coffee ready." The aide blinked in confusion. "Coffee, ma'am?" "Ambassador Crichton has been traveling for weeks. The least we can do is offer proper hospitality." 3 hours later, the main assembly hall of the United Nations buzzed with quiet conversation. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered, but the atmosphere felt more like a celebration than a crisis meeting. Some delegates were actually taking selfies with the alien vessel, visible through the large windows. Ambassador Crichton entered the hall with the measured gait of someone accustomed to inspiring terror. The hegemony representative stood nearly 8 feet tall, with deep blue skin that seemed to absorb light and 6 arms that moved with practiced intimidation. His species, the Vorthak, had conquered 17 star systems and subjugated dozens of alien races. Earth was supposed to be just another easy addition to their empire. But as Crichton approached the podium, he noticed something that made him pause. The humans weren't cowering. They weren't whispering prayers or crying for mercy. They were watching him with the kind of intense curiosity usually reserved for fascinating museum exhibits. Sarah Chen rose from her seat in the front row and walked to meet the ambassador. She extended her hand in the traditional human greeting, completely ignoring the fact that Crichton's 6 arms could have crushed her without effort. "Ambassador Crichton," she said warmly, "welcome to Earth. We've been looking forward to this moment for a very long time." Crichton stared at the small human hand extended toward him. In his 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever greeted him with anything but fear or desperate defiance. This human seemed genuinely pleased to see him. "You know why I am here," Crichton said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had broken the will of countless worlds. "Of course we do," Sarah replied, still smiling. "You're here to offer us the chance to surrender before you destroy our civilization. It's very thoughtful of you to give us the option." The hegemony ambassador felt a chill run through his blue skin. This human spoke about the destruction of her entire species, as if discussing weekend plans. Dr. Marcus Webb joined Sarah at the podium. He was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. As head of the Strategic Planning Division, he had spent decades studying every piece of information Earth had gathered about the hegemony. "Ambassador," Dr. Webb said, adjusting his glasses, "we've prepared a presentation about our response to your generous offer. I think you'll find it quite interesting." Crichton's 6 arms tensed. No species had ever called a surrender demand generous before. "There is no presentation necessary. You will submit to hegemony authority, or your world will be reduced to ash." The assembly hall fell silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then, incredibly, several humans began to chuckle. The chuckling spread through the crowd until nearly everyone was laughing softly. Not the desperate laughter of people losing their minds, but the warm laughter of people sharing a private joke. Sarah gestured to the large screen behind the podium. "Ambassador, before you leave, we'd like to show you something." Dr. Webb has put together quite an educational display. The screen flickered to life, showing a star map of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated hegemony-controlled systems, while blue markers showed independent worlds. But scattered throughout the map were thousands of tiny green markers that Crichton had never seen in any official hegemony charts. "What are those green markers?" Crichton asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer.
Those, Dr. Webb explained cheerfully, are human research stations, trade posts, and cultural exchange centers. We've been quite busy over the past 50 years. The display zoomed in on various sectors, revealing that human presence in the galaxy was far more extensive than any hegemony intelligence report had suggested. Worse, many of the green markers were located in systems the hegemony considered secure. Impossible, Crixon muttered. Our sensors would have detected major human expansion. Sarah exchanged a glance with Dr. Webb. Oh, we're not expanding, Ambassador. We're connecting. The screen changed to show communication logs, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs between Earth and hundreds of alien species throughout the galaxy. Many of these species were supposedly loyal hegemony subjects. You see, Dr. Webb continued, while you were busy conquering and intimidating, we were doing something much more interesting. We were making friends. Crixon felt his confidence beginning to crack. The hegemony maintained control through isolation and fear. If humans had been building relationships with hegemony subjects for decades, the implications were staggering. The Corelli and the Sigma sector have been sharing agricultural techniques with our colonies, Sarah explained, highlighting one section of the map. They've increased food production by 40% using human hydroponics technology. The Zenthians have been working with our engineers to develop new propulsion systems, Dr. Webb added. Turns out, when you combine their mathematical genius with human creativity, amazing things happen. And the Rillan artists have been collaborating with human musicians, Sarah continued. They're creating art forms that neither species could have imagined alone. With each revelation, Crixon felt the foundations of hegemony power shifting beneath him. The Empire maintained control by keeping subject species separated and dependent. If humans had been fostering cooperation and independence among these species, then everything the hegemony represented was under threat. This is irrelevant, Crixon declared, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The hegemony has military superiority. We have conquered every species we have encountered. Sarah's smile grew wider. That's true, Ambassador. You have an impressive military record, but there's something you might not understand about humans. The screen changed again, this time showing historical footage from Earth's past. Images of human conflicts, revolutions, and struggles against overwhelming odds filled the display. Humans have been fighting impossible battles for our entire history, Dr. Webb explained. We've overthrown empires, survived disasters, and overcome every challenge our world could throw at us. We've learned something that perhaps the hegemony hasn't discovered yet. What's that? Crixon asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. The secret to winning isn't having the biggest army or the most advanced weapons, Sarah said. The secret is understanding what you're really fighting for. The screen showed images of human cooperation, innovation, and resilience. Scenes of people from different cultures working together, solving problems, and building something better than what came before. When you conquer a world, Ambassador, you gain subjects who serve because they must, Dr. Webb explained. But when you inspire a world, you gain allies who fight because they choose to. Crixon realized that he was no longer looking at a primitive species preparing to surrender. He was looking at something the hegemony had never encountered before, a species that viewed the galaxy's greatest military threat as an opportunity for growth and learning. You're refusing our offer of surrender? Crixon asked, though he already knew the answer. Oh, quite the opposite, Sarah replied. We're accepting your invitation to dance. The ambassador's 6 arms trembled slightly. Invitation to dance. Dr. Webb stepped forward, his kind eyes now gleaming with an intensity that made Crixon step backward. You came here offering us war, Ambassador. We're treating it as an invitation to show the galaxy what we've learned about cooperation, innovation, and the power of voluntary alliance. Sarah activated a communication device on the podium. Admiral Torres, please transmit our response to the hegemony fleet. The large screen switched to show a live feed of Earth's orbital space, where Crixon expected to see a handful of primitive human vessels cowering before the mighty hegemony war fleet. He instead saw something that made his blue skin turn pale. Hundreds of ships floated in formation around Earth, but they weren't all human vessels. The sleek curves of Corelli agricultural ships mixed with the crystalline structures of Zenthian science vessels. Rillan exploration craft danced between human military ships in patterns that suggested not just alliance, but genuine cooperation. You see, Ambassador, Sarah said as Crixon stared at the impossible sight. While you were planning to conquer Earth, we were building something much more powerful than an empire. We were building a community, Dr. Webb added. The communication device crackled to life, broadcasting Earth's response to the hegemony fleet on all channels. But instead of a surrender or a defiant battle cry, the message was something entirely unexpected. "Attention hegemony forces," came the voice of Admiral Torres. "Earth and her allies welcome you to the galaxy's first free cultural exchange program. We invite you to learn with us, grow with us, and discover what's possible when different species work together instead of against each other." Crixon felt his worldview crumbling. "This is madness. You're treating a war declaration as a cultural event." Sarah's smile never wavered. "Ambassador, we've been studying your species and your empire for decades. We know how you think, how you fight, and most importantly, what you're afraid of." "What we're afraid of?" Crixon repeated weakly. "Change," Dr. Webb said simply. "The hegemony is terrified of change. You've built your entire civilization around preventing it. But change is the one thing in the universe that can't be conquered." The screen showed real-time feeds from hegemony-controlled systems throughout the galaxy. In system after system, alien species were watching Earth's response to the hegemony ultimatum. And instead of the expected scenes of terror and submission, they were seeing something revolutionary, a species choosing cooperation over conquest, innovation over intimidation. "Right now," Sarah explained, "billions of beings across the galaxy are learning that there's an alternative to hegemony rule. They're discovering that they don't have to choose between conquest and subjugation. They can choose partnership," Dr. Webb added. Crixon backed toward the exit, his 6 arms shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't how conquest was supposed to work. Species were supposed to surrender or be destroyed, not turn a war into a philosophical awakening that threatened to spread across the entire galaxy. "You cannot win against the hegemony," Crixon said, his voice cracking. "We have the most powerful military force in galactic history." Sarah walked with him to the door, maintaining her warm, welcoming demeanor. "Ambassador, you're absolutely right. The hegemony does have the most powerful military in the galaxy, but we're not trying to defeat your military." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "We're trying to give your people something they've never had before, a choice." As Crixon hurried back to his ship, he could hear the sounds of celebration beginning across Earth. Humans weren't preparing for war in the traditional sense. They were preparing for something much more dangerous to the hegemony way of life. They were preparing to teach the galaxy how to be free. From her position at the observation deck, Sarah Chen watched the silver ship lift off and disappear into the stars. Dr. Webb joined her, both of them quiet for a moment as they contemplated what came next. "Think they'll accept our invitation?" Dr. Webb asked. Sarah's smile turned into a grin. "Marcus, they've already accepted. They just don't know it yet." Across the galaxy, the first shots of the war between the hegemony and Earth were about to be fired. But unlike every previous galactic conflict, this war wouldn't be won by whoever had the biggest guns or the fastest ships. This war would be won by whoever could best teach the galaxy how to dream of something better, and humanity had been preparing for that lesson their entire existence. The students become teachers. The hegemony war fleet assembled at the edge of Earth's solar system like a storm made of metal and malice. 3,000 vessels stretched across space in perfect formation, their weapons charged and their crews confident. Fleet Commander Zaxxon stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion, his 4 eyes scanning tactical displays that showed overwhelming superiority in every category. "All squadrons report ready," announced his tactical officer, a Vorthak warrior whose family had served the hegemony for 5 generations. Zaxxon nodded, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge. As a member of the ruling Hegemony Council, he had personally overseen the conquest of 12 worlds. Earth would be his 13th victory, and probably his easiest. "Begin the assault," he commanded. "Standard formation. Overwhelm their defenses, capture their leadership, process their surrender." But as the hegemony fleet moved forward, something unexpected began to happen. The human and allied vessels didn't retreat to defensive positions around Earth. Instead, they scattered in seemingly random directions, disappearing behind asteroids, moons, and space debris. "Where are they going?" Zaxxon demanded. "Are they fleeing?" His tactical officer studied the readings with growing confusion. "Sir, they appear to be hiding throughout the entire solar system." Zaxxon laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "Hiding? Pathetic. Begin systematic searches. We'll drag them out one by one." Light years away from the battle, in a hidden human facility orbiting a dead star, Captain Elena Rodriguez monitored the engagement from her command ship, the Inspiration. Unlike the massive hegemony vessels built for intimidation, her ship was sleek, fast, and packed with technology that represented decades of collaborative development between humans and their alien friends. Hegemony forces are spreading out to search for our ships, reported Lieutenant Chen, her communications officer. They're following standard hunting patterns. Captain Rodriguez smiled. Elena had grown up in the asteroid belt, where survival meant thinking 3 steps ahead and using every advantage available. Her dark skin bore the ritual scars of the Belt Miners Guild, and her eyes held the steady confidence of someone who had never lost a game she truly cared about winning. Excellent. Initiate Phase 2. Back in Earth's solar system, hegemony search squadrons were methodically checking every possible hiding spot. They found human ships tucked behind asteroids, nestled in the shadows of gas giant moons, and drifting silently among space debris. But each discovery led to the same puzzling result. Another one just vanished, reported Squadron Leader Vex. We had them cornered behind Europa, but when we moved to capture them, they simply disappeared. Zaxxon's 4 eyes narrowed. Disappeared? Ships don't disappear. They either fight or surrender. Sir, his science officer interrupted. I'm detecting unusual energy readings throughout the system. It appears the humans have deployed some kind of network. Before Zaxxon could respond, his communications array lit up with incoming messages from across the galaxy. But these weren't military reports from hegemony forces. These were broadcasts from hegemony-controlled worlds, and the content made Zaxxon's blood run cold. On the planet Corvash, a mining world that had served the hegemony for 2 centuries, something unprecedented was happening. The Corvashi workers had gathered in their largest settlement, and instead of preparing for their daily labor quota, they were watching a broadcast from Earth. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on screens throughout the settlement, speaking in fluent Corvashi. Friends of Corvash, we want to share something with you. Your mining techniques are incredible, but we've learned that when combined with human hydroponics technology, you could grow enough food to feed your entire world without importing anything from the hegemony. The broadcast showed side-by-side comparisons of traditional Corvashi mining operations and new hybrid facilities where food grew in the same underground chambers where valuable minerals were extracted. The implications were staggering. Food independence meant freedom from hegemony control. Similar broadcasts were reaching every hegemony world simultaneously. On Zenthia Prime, human engineers demonstrated how Zenthian mathematical models could create faster-than-light communication networks that didn't require hegemony relay stations. On Rillan colonies, human artists showed how traditional Rillan music could be combined with human storytelling to create entertainment that inspired rather than simply distracted. Engineer Lisa Park coordinated these broadcasts from her mobile laboratory, a ship that looked like a cross between a workshop and a university classroom. Lisa had spent her entire career believing that technology was only as good as the people who used it together. Status report from all cultural exchange teams, Lisa announced into her communicator. Zenthian response is overwhelming, came the reply from the Zenthian sector. Their mathematicians are already adapting our designs. They're calling it liberation through calculation. Corvashi miners are implementing food independence protocols as we speak, reported another team. They're sharing techniques with neighboring systems. Rillan artists are creating what they call freedom songs, added a third voice. The compositions are spreading faster than we can track. Back on the hegemony flagship, Commander Zaxxon watched his empire begin to crack in real time. Rebellions weren't supposed to spread this fast. Subject species weren't supposed to have the technical knowledge to become independent. Most importantly, they weren't supposed to have hope. Sir, his intelligence officer reported with obvious panic, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different systems. But they're not asking to surrender to us. They're asking to surrender to the humans. That's impossible, Zaxxon roared. Humans barely have a space fleet. Sir, I think we've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about human capabilities. The main screen activated, showing a face that Zaxxon recognized as Commander Sarah Chen. But she wasn't broadcasting from Earth. She was speaking from what appeared to be a hegemony command center. Greetings, Fleet Commander Zaxxon, Sarah said pleasantly. I hope you don't mind that we've borrowed one of your communication facilities. We wanted to make sure our message reached you clearly. Zaxxon felt his 4 hearts stop beating. How are you in a hegemony facility? Oh, we're not in one of your facilities, Sarah replied. We're in one of our facilities. It just used to be yours. The screen split to show dozens of similar broadcasts. Human commanders were speaking from hegemony installations throughout the galaxy, but they weren't alone. Standing beside each human were representatives of the local alien species, and they were all smiling. You see, Commander, Sarah continued, While you were focusing on our military capabilities, we were working on something much more important. We were teaching. Captain Rodriguez appeared on another section of the screen. Every human who visited a hegemony world over the past 50 years was actually a teacher in disguise. We taught engineering to the Zenthians, agriculture to the Corvashi, art to the Rillans, and most importantly, we taught everyone the most dangerous subject of all. What subject? Zaxxon whispered, though he dreaded the answer. How to think for themselves, Elena replied. The implications hit Zaxxon like a physical blow. The hegemony maintained control by keeping subject species dependent and isolated. If humans had been teaching these species to be self-sufficient and to communicate with each other, then the entire foundation of hegemony power was crumbling. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Commander Zaxxon, Sarah said, her tone becoming more serious, we need to discuss your fleet. What about my fleet? Zaxxon demanded. Well, they've been learning too. The tactical display on Zaxxon's bridge began showing something that shouldn't have been possible. His own ships were breaking formation, not fleeing or retreating, but actively changing sides. One by one, hegemony vessels were broadcasting messages of alliance with Earth. This is Captain Vorthak of the hegemony vessel Subjugator, came a voice from Zaxxon's own communication system. My crew has voted to join the Earth Alliance. We're tired of conquering. We want to try building something instead. This is Admiral Korvex of the Hegemony Third Fleet, announced another voice. We've reviewed the human proposals for galactic cooperation. They make more sense than anything the hegemony has offered us in centuries. Zaxxon realized that while he had been planning military strategy, the humans had been implementing psychological warfare on a scale never before attempted. They hadn't just been teaching alien species to rebel against the hegemony, they had been teaching hegemony forces to question why they were fighting in the first place. Engineer Lisa Park appeared on the main screen, surrounded by alien scientists from a dozen different species. Commander, would you like to know how we did it? How you did what? Zaxxon asked weakly. How we convinced your own people to switch sides without firing a single shot. Lisa gestured to her companions. We showed them what they could accomplish if they worked with their colleagues instead of ruling over them. We demonstrated that cooperation produces better results than conquest. One of the alien scientists stepped forward. This was Dr. Vex, a Vorthak researcher who had spent decades developing weapons for the hegemony. Commander Zaxxon, the humans taught us something our own leaders never showed us. They taught us that our intelligence was valuable for creation, not just destruction. Another alien spoke up, this one a Corvashi engineer. They showed us designs that our species developed independently, then demonstrated how much more we could achieve by working together. Every species in the hegemony has unique capabilities, Lisa explained. But your government kept everyone separated and focused on serving instead of creating. We simply showed them what was possible when those capabilities were combined. The screen changed to show collaborative projects happening throughout the galaxy. Zenthian mathematicians working with human engineers to design new types of spacecraft. Corvashi miners partnering with Rillan artists to create beautiful and functional underground cities. Vorthak scientists using their research skills to develop medical treatments instead of weapons. This is what the galaxy looks like when species work together, Sarah Chen announced. This is what we've been building while you were planning to conquer us. Commander Zaxxon looked around his bridge and realized he was alone. His crew had quietly left their stations and were now watching the broadcasts with expressions of wonder rather than loyalty. They weren't abandoning their posts. They were choosing their future. Sir, his former tactical officer approached carefully. The human proposals for Galactic Alliance include provisions for hegemony leadership to transition into advisory roles. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to give us a chance to be part of something better. Zaxxon felt the weight of 3,000 years of hegemony tradition pressing down on him. His species had built their identity around conquest and control. The idea of voluntary cooperation was as foreign to him as breathing underwater. But as he looked at the displays showing the galaxy transforming in real time, he began to understand what the humans had really accomplished. They hadn't defeated the hegemony through superior firepower or clever tactics. They had made the hegemony irrelevant by creating something that worked better. Commander? Sarah Chen's voice came through the speakers one more time. We're not asking you to surrender. We're inviting you to evolve. What does that mean? Zaxxon asked. It means you get to choose what comes next. You can keep trying to hold together an empire that no longer wants to be controlled, or you can help us build a galaxy where everyone contributes their best abilities voluntarily. The bridge fell silent as Zaxxon considered options he had never imagined having. For the first time in his life, he was being offered a choice instead of given an order. Outside the viewports, the massive hegemony war fleet was transforming before his eyes. Ships that had come to conquer Earth were now forming cooperative formations with human and alien vessels. Former enemies were sharing technology, resources, and ideas. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge one final time. "Commander, the war is over, but if you'd like, the real work is just beginning." Zaxxon looked at his crew, at the displays showing galactic transformation, and at the human faces on his screens who were treating him with respect despite holding all the advantages. For the first time in hegemony history, a fleet commander was about to make a decision based on hope instead of fear. "Tell me more about this alliance," he said quietly. And across the galaxy, billions of beings felt the future shift towards something brighter than anyone had dared to imagine. When the galaxy learns to dance. 6 months after the war that never happened, the galaxy looked like a completely different place. What had once been rigid hegemony sectors were now bustling networks of cooperative worlds. Trade routes that had carried tribute to hegemony overlords now transported ideas, art, and innovations between species eager to learn from each other. On the planet New Geneva, a world that had been constructed specifically to serve as the headquarters of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance, representatives from over 200 species gathered for the first Universal Assembly. The building itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with architectural elements from dozens of different cultures blended into something that was both functional and beautiful. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood former Hegemony Fleet Commander Zaxxon, who now served as the Alliance's Director of Peaceful Transition. His 4 eyes, once cold with conquest, now gleamed with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered a purpose beyond domination. 6 months ago, Sarah began, addressing the diverse crowd of beings that filled the assembly hall. "We were preparing for what we thought would be the galaxy's greatest war. Instead, we discovered something much more powerful than conflict." The audience, composed of creatures with scales, fur, crystalline skin, and forms that defied easy description, listened with attention that would have been impossible under the old hegemony system. There were no guards forcing anyone to pay attention, no threat of punishment for disagreement. These beings were here because they wanted to be. "We discovered," Zaxxon continued, his voice carrying none of its former commanding harshness, "that cooperation produces results that no single species could achieve alone." Dr. Marcus Webb approached the podium carrying a tablet filled with data that represented the most comprehensive study of galactic progress ever conducted. His silver hair was now completely white, but his eyes sparkled with the excitement of a scientist who had lived to see his theories proven correct. "The numbers are extraordinary," he announced, displaying holographic charts that floated above the assembly. "In 6 months of cooperative alliance, we've achieved technological advances that surpass the previous 1,000 years of hegemony rule." The first chart showed food production increases across former hegemony worlds. "By sharing agricultural techniques between species, we've eliminated hunger on 47 worlds and reduced food scarcity on hundreds more." A murmur of appreciation ran through the crowd. Under hegemony rule, many worlds had been kept artificially dependent on food imports as a means of control. The idea that worlds could feed themselves seemed revolutionary to species that had forgotten what self-sufficiency looked like. "Medical advances have been even more dramatic," Dr. Webb continued. "When Vorthak healing techniques were combined with human surgical methods and Zenthian biological analysis, we developed treatments for diseases that have plagued the galaxy for millennia." Captain Elena Rodriguez, now serving as Director of Interspecies Cooperation, took the stage to present the most impressive achievements. Her asteroid belt tattoos had been joined by new markings representing each species she had worked with, creating a living map of galactic unity on her arms. "The real breakthrough," Elena explained, "came when we realized that every species had developed unique solutions to universal problems. The challenge wasn't finding new answers, it was sharing the answers we already had." The holographic display changed to show engineering marvels that would have seemed impossible under the old system. Space stations that combined Corvashi mining efficiency with Rilan artistic beauty and human practical innovation. Starships that used Zenthian mathematical principles, Vorthak durability enhancements, and human adaptive systems to achieve speeds and capabilities that no single species could have imagined. "But technology wasn't our greatest achievement," Sarah Chen said, drawing the assembly's attention back to the central message. "Our greatest achievement was learning to trust each other." Engineer Lisa Park joined the group at the podium. Her mobile laboratory had become the template for dozens of cooperative research vessels that now traveled between worlds, sharing knowledge and solving problems collaboratively. She carried with her a device that had become the symbol of the new galaxy, a translation matrix that could facilitate real-time communication between any known species. Under the hegemony, Lisa explained, different species were kept isolated from each other. They communicated only through hegemony channels, using hegemony translators, following hegemony protocols. We changed that. She activated the translation matrix, and her words simultaneously appeared in the native languages of every species in the assembly. But more than just translating words, the device conveyed emotional context, cultural nuance, and conceptual meaning that had been lost in the rigid hegemony communication system. When beings can truly understand each other, Lisa continued, cooperation becomes natural instead of forced. The assembly erupted in what could only be described as applause, though it took hundreds of different forms. Some species clapped hands, others buzzed wings, and still others changed colors in patterns that expressed approval. The translation matrix converted all of these expressions into a universal language of appreciation, but not everything in the new galaxy was celebration and progress. Former Hegemony Central Command, now serving as Alliance Security Headquarters, still dealt with species and groups that preferred the old system of control and subjugation. Admiral Torres, Earth's former fleet commander who now led Alliance security forces, reported on the remaining challenges. We still have 17 sectors where hegemony loyalists maintain control through traditional conquest methods. They refuse Alliance membership and continue to suppress local populations. Sarah nodded gravely. This was always going to be the most difficult part of galactic transformation. Not every group will choose cooperation voluntarily. What do we do about them? Asked a representative of the Crystalline Coalition, a species that communicated through harmonic vibrations. Commander Zaxxon stepped forward to address this question. As someone who had lived his entire life under the hegemony system, he understood the mindset of those who refused to change. We do exactly what the humans taught us, he said. We demonstrate that our way works better and we wait for them to choose differently. But what if they never choose to change? Pressed another representative. What if they continue to harm others? Then we protect those who need protection, Sarah replied, but we do it without becoming what we opposed. We defend freedom without destroying those who oppose it. Dr. Webb activated another holographic display, this one showing Alliance response protocols. When hegemony loyalists attack Alliance worlds or refuse to allow their populations to choose freely, we respond with what we call defensive liberation. The display showed recent operations where Alliance forces had intervened to stop oppression. But unlike traditional military conquest, these operations focused on creating opportunities for local populations to make their own choices about their future. We don't conquer these worlds, Elena Rodriguez explained. We create safe spaces where their populations can decide for themselves whether they want to remain under authoritarian control or join the cooperative alliance. The results speak for themselves, Lisa Park added. In every case where populations have been given a genuine choice, they've chosen cooperation over conquest. The assembly watched footage from recently liberated worlds. Instead of the usual scenes of military occupation and forced conversion, they saw celebration parades, voluntary integration ceremonies, and species discovering their own capabilities for the first time in generations. But the most powerful moment came when a representative from one of these recently liberated worlds stood to address the assembly. The being was a member of the Ethereal Collective, a species of energy-based entities that had been enslaved by hegemony loyalists for over 500 years. For centuries, we believed we were inferior because we could not build physical structures like other species, the ethereal representative communicated through pure thought, translated instantly by Lisa's matrix. The hegemony used our self-doubt to keep us enslaved, telling us we needed their protection because we were useless. The being's energy form shifted colors as emotions played across their field. The Alliance taught us that our ability to exist as pure energy makes us perfect for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. We went from believing we were the galaxy's most useless species to becoming its most effective communicators. The assembly fell into reverent silence as the implications of this transformation became clear. Under the hegemony, the ethereals had been treated as slaves because their unique nature wasn't understood or valued. Under the Alliance, they had become essential partners whose abilities enabled the entire cooperative network. Sarah Chen felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized they had achieved something she had barely dared to dream. They hadn't just ended a war or toppled an empire, they had created a galaxy where every being could discover and contribute their unique value. "This is what we built," she said, her voice carrying across the assembly hall. "Not through conquest or control, but by believing that every species had something valuable to offer." Commander Zaxxon moved to stand beside her, his massive frame no longer intimidating but protective. "The humans taught us that strength comes not from ruling over others, but from helping others become strong." Dr. Webb joined them, followed by Elena Rodriguez and Lisa Park. The 5 beings who had guided the galaxy's transformation stood together, representing not victory over enemies but partnership between former adversaries. "The galaxy is dancing now," Elena said, using a metaphor that the translation matrix conveyed perfectly to every species present. "We're all moving together, each contributing our own rhythm, creating something more beautiful than any of us could make alone." The assembly rose in the universal expression of agreement, their combined voices, colors, vibrations, and movements creating a symphony of cooperation that would have been impossible under any system based on dominance and control. As the formal session ended and representatives began mingling, sharing ideas and forming new partnerships, Sarah Chen looked out through the great windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, hegemony loyalists still clung to the old ways of conquest and control, but their influence was shrinking every day as more worlds discovered the alternative. The war they had prepared for had become a lesson in cooperation. The galaxy they had defended had become a community, and humanity's gift to the universe turned out to be not superior weapons or clever tactics, but something much more powerful: the courage to believe that everyone deserved a chance to be their best self. Dr. Webb approached her as the assembly hall gradually emptied. "Sarah, do you think we've really changed the galaxy permanently?" Sarah smiled, watching a group of young beings from a dozen different species working together on what appeared to be a new artistic project. "Marcus, look around. We haven't just changed the galaxy. We've shown it how to keep changing itself." Outside the great windows, ships from hundreds of worlds moved in patterns that would have looked like chaos to hegemony military doctrine. But to eyes that understood cooperation, the movement looked exactly like what Elena had described: a galaxy learning to dance. And in that dance, every species contributed their own unique rhythm to a song that was still being written, still growing more complex and beautiful with each passing day. The war that could have destroyed the galaxy had instead taught it how to create something greater than the sum of all its parts. Humanity had kept its promise. They had treated the war declaration like a welcome party, and in doing so, they had welcomed the galaxy into a future none of them had imagined possible.